Welcome to Multifamily Grit, where we bring in the experts to share their stories of the celebrations and struggles of one of the most important industries in the U.S., multifamily property management. Kerri sat down with Marc Pollack, an industry leader with over 15 years in multifamily, currently serving as a senior executive at a large third-party management company. With a background that spans affordable, urban, and luxury operations, Marc brings a rare, well-rounded perspective, combining technical expertise learned from the boiler rooms to boardrooms, and a deep understanding of both the owner and resident experience. Marc's role is anything but typical. As the bridge between investors focused on capital and communities focused on home, he helps humanize the business of property management, balancing efficiency, empathy, and scale. His approach is rooted in supporting on-site teams, building systems that work, and translating between the language of finance and the realities of people's lives. In this episode, Marc opens up about the grind of multifamily, the urgency, the stress, and the emotional toll that comes with managing people, assets, and expectations every single day. He shares how he leads through empathy and perspective, what it takes to build scalable processes without losing the human touch, and why the best operators are those who can truly understand both sides of the equation. Before we get started, this episode is sponsored by Fortress, the only core property management operating system built with an emphasis for affordable owners and operators. Fortress revolutionizes affordable management with features focused on automating housing assistance charges and payments to keep ledgers clean and accurate, centralizing file reviews and document storage through Fortress and AWS, and a free in-system smart waitlist to ensure your property stays in compliance. And don't forget, if you like what you hear today, please like, subscribe, and share with someone you think would enjoy this episode. Now let's get into it. Here's Kerri Davis sitting down with Marc Pollack for a conversation about empathy, efficiency, and the realities of multifamily.
So, Marc, thank you so much again for being here with me today.
It's my pleasure, Kerri. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and before we dig in, I'm going to ask you the question I ask everybody. Would you mind sharing with our listeners how you got your start in the industry?
Sure. I like to tell people that I got my start in the industry by just being somebody who lived in an apartment building.
Yeah.
I grew up in Queens, New York, where a lot of the housing is multifamily high-rise apartment buildings. And I was just a tenant. Lived with my mom and my sister in a 3-bedroom apartment in Queens and grew up there, lived there for over 10 years. And just through that process, just understood, even at a subconscious level, just, the things that were going on in the building, the types of employees, the job descriptions, sort of what it looks like, waiting for the elevator, and all the little nuances and subtleties in between. And so when I came out of school, I kind of went back home to Queens and just kind of felt like I understood that there was a lot to do to run an apartment building. And there was a large property management company based in Queens that I'd always driven by, on my way to Little League or basketball practice, or when we used to walk the streets as teenagers, and kind of just went in there and said, I know what it's like to be your customer. Do you have an internship? And that was sort of the beginning and the middle and the end right there.
Oh my gosh, I love that story. I feel like it's a rare one, honestly. I feel like so often I hear about people like falling into property management, right? They're like going to college and they're looking at housing, and someone says to them, "Oh, you'd be a great leasing consultant," or they're just trying to find a way to make ends meet. But you were intentional about it, which I think is really interesting.
Well, all throughout undergrad at the University of Maryland, where I went to college, I knew that I didn't know. I used to sort of, one of the jokes I had growing up was like the stereotype of family businesses, and the next generation has like animosity or spite and doesn't want to go into the family business. They want to go chart their own path. Yeah. And I used to make the joke, like, I wish there was somebody in a previous generation who left me a family business. I would love to run a family business because I don't really know what else I want to do.
Yeah.
And, good advice from Dad was always learn how to communicate well, specifically learn how to write well.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, this is maybe not like post AI chat GPT advice, but like for many years, learn how to write well was a competitive advantage, because no matter what you want to do, sales, marketing, you know, investment management, or be a barista.
Yep.
Like, you need to know how to communicate with other people. You need to know how to articulate your ideas and your feelings. And so in college, I just sort of focused on writing well, learning how to write. And so I didn't have a charted path, but I knew that when I got back from school, I knew that industry, the property management real estate industry, was sort of there and present.
Yeah.
And sort of to your, almost in your intro, you said something to the effect of one of the most important industries. And, you know, it's not known by a lot of people how important it is. It's
Yeah.
not even known like how relevant and even large it is. So, yeah.
I love it. So you walked into that property management company that you'd driven by so many times and asked them for an internship because it was an industry that you had known and you'd paid attention to while you were growing up. So what happened next?
Yeah. So turns out the internship was a very loosely defined program. You know, I was always
Being
goal
generous.
focused, ambitious. You know, I was like I didn't want to be paid to do nothing.
Yeah.
I would rather not be paid to do something. And that was a 21-year-old, 20-year-old mindset. You know, I don't want to dive too deep into how you get to that mindset unless you want to talk about it. But basically, that was my thing. I wasn't worried about like making 30, 40, 50K entry level salaries, at whatever it was, just to have an income. I wanted those early years to be about improving my skills, learning, growing as a person at a thing. And so after a couple, you know, they sort of marketed it like, we have this program, and at the end of the program, you come out with your stars and your stripes, and you're a manager. And that was awesome.
Yeah.
Because even to this day, we don't have enough structured training and
Oh,
enough
sure.
sort of like of a charted path. You do this, and then you do that.
Yeah.
But so after a couple of weeks of filing the blue folders with the blue and the red folders with the red, and I started to go crazy. Again, it was sort of just like a what do you have to lose mentality.
Yeah.
And I basically knocked on the vice president's door and was basically like, I can do more than this. Like, what else can I do? And I started working on the bid of a laundry room renovation contract.
Okay.
And, you know, the three different service providers that come and operate the laundry room, the different prices, the scope of services, the insurance levels. And I started working on my first leveling chart. You know, little did I know that's what it was called at the time.
Yeah.
But I started working on my first leveling chart of, you know, vendor A, vendor B, vendor C. And so I started to get more and more assignments. But basically, even then, it wasn't enough for me. Like, I still was antsy. And I went into the big boss's corner office, which had this big window overlooking Queens Boulevard, you know, big corner office, very old school, typical type of corner office. And, you know, he kind of said, you have some guts coming in here. This was an old school style of managing of a mature old company.
Yeah.
The person was in the role for many years. You got some guts coming in here. What do you want? What do you need? I said, please, I'm ready. I'm ready to manage a building. I'm ready to manage a building. And he points out the window at the building across the street, which happens to be one of the buildings under management for this company. You know, a long-term client contract. And he says, you know how long we've been managing that building? And I didn't know. I said a long time. He says over 30 years we've been managing that building. He says, and look at it, it's still standing. And I had no idea what he was. I had no idea what he was trying to. What is this? And he goes, all right, you know what? If it hasn't burned down yet, how bad could you do? And that was That was his way of giving me the building across the street.
Oh,
and he said, if it lights on fire, I'll be the first to know. And before you know it, that was about 130 unit building.
Okay.
I got two more sort of similar type buildings in South Brooklyn. because who wants to go to South Brooklyn? Send the kid to South Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And before you know it, 350 units, 3 supers, 20 employees. I was 22 or 23 years old.
Oh my
I
God.
had 2 property managers at the company. One formally was supposed to be looking out for me, and the other, like, we had some chemistry. And so I, said, take me under your wing. And it was a lot of training through experience, training through fire. And 300 units became a full load of 800 or 1,000, became showing managers who had 5 or 10 years more experience why I thought doing it differently, had some value add,
Yeah.
or
Love
just
that.
showing my effort. I mean, another one of like early life lessons that's agnostic to what you decide you want to be when you grow up is just there's all this stuff you cannot control. So be really on top of the things you can control. Being on time, being prepared, smiling, being easy to work with, being coachable, being open to new ideas, not being afraid to contribute, right? Like these are all things that no matter what you do, you can be someone at the table.
Yeah.
And so I was just super focused on, like, I was, some of the cliche stuff. I was early. I stayed late. I waited, and it worked out, it worked out. There were moments where it was just like, it did take a little bit of pushing, or like just going out a little bit on the edge, out of your comfort zone, maybe is the best way to
Love
put it,
that.
right? There were moments, I mean, I remember to get that meeting with the vice president, I wrote an email asking for the meeting. And it was like a Friday afternoon. I had nothing to do. It was 1:00. I had 4 hours to sit there. And I'm like drafting this email. And I sent it to like the close people in my life at the time, my dad, a friend, my aunt. And I remember my dad calling me going, "What the heck are you doing? Like, you're at this company for 6 months, 4 months, whatever it was. You're a nothing. You're a nobody. This is one of the established companies in an industry you think you want to be in. Like, go for a walk. Do not send this email. You have to prove yourself more." And just intuition, I don't know. I didn't take that advice. I sent the email. And I told you kind of the rest of the story. I'm going out of order, but
I love it.
It broke through.
Yeah.
And so the things that you can control are the things you have to focus on as you're younger, more, as you're newer in a career or in a job where you're still developing the skills. You can't compete with someone who has 10 years experience when you have one on years of experience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what can you compete with them on? Right. And like, that's kind of the mindset.
Yeah. Oh, so couldn't agree with you more. I love that mindset of, like, there's so many things that we can't control. So be on top of the things that you can control. And one of the things I love that you said was just smile, like just be a good human. Like that's something that's so easily controlled, and yet too few people do it. And so, like, I think having that is so wonderful. But I actually want to take a step back, because I love the fact that you stepped outside of that proverbial box that they had put you in and asked for more, not doing it for more money or more like power or more prestige. But what you said really hit home with me was that, like, you were capable of so much more. So in other words, the company was losing out by having you file red and blue folders rather than letting you do more, because you were capable. Not that you wanted more money, but that you knew that the company could exploit you for so much more. And so, like, you could add so much more value. And so you should be. I love that. I tell people all the time, like, my career is so chaotic. Like, if you look at my history and what I've done, it's so chaotic. But the thing for me is that what I've always been good at, I think, is that I've made a career out of being a little bit of a troublemaker. Like, I see something's wrong, or I see an opportunity to fix something, and I just don't care. Like, like sometimes, like, people's toes are going to get stepped on or whatever, but it's not that I'm mean. I'm not at all. But it's about the company. Like, it's not about, I'm not trying to get more money for myself or whatever. I'm just trying to create success. And the success for the company usually means success for others and more money for everybody. But it's really just about creating success. So I love that so much. I love that mindset.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, it took me. You're better than me, because it took me longer into my career to adopt the understanding that sometimes letting something break is the best way to fix it. You know,
Yeah.
early in my career, from an age perspective, I was young. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I was younger than everyone in the room. I was younger than everyone in the building.
Yeah.
And so I had to be strategic and like playing my card, playing my hand. Like I was the
Yeah.
junior young kid in the mix. And so I was much more in the early days about perfection,
Mm-hmm.
trying to hit perfection, right? Because I'm unproven. I'm totally unproven.
Yeah.
Um, you realize, I'll bet people learned it faster than me. But like perfection is not scalable.
Yeah. Yep.
Um,
So
but you
true.
do need to scale. You
Mm-hmm.
do need to scale your
Mm-hmm.
career, your growth, your value, what you can offer the company, the clients, the stakeholders. So you have to leave perfection at the door at some
Yeah.
point. And I give you a lot of credit for kind of being a let things break, kind of person, because that is often you learn so much that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I haven't always been this way, so I appreciate that. But it took a while to get there to like let it be okay. But I mean, and I think to your point, like we're forced to get there, right? Like, I mean, when you're managing 3 supers and 20 people, like you can't control one of them, let alone all 20 of them. Like you can't. And so like shit's gonna break. Like there's nothing you could do about it. It's more about like
Well,
you said,
it's also about how do you instill accountability in
yeah,
others,
yeah,
right? Like if you're just a rescuer,
yeah, yes,
right, then they don't learn, the
yeah,
operation doesn't get better, and you are engaging in unscalable activities. So you're like kind of messing with all the stakeholders there,
yeah,
right? And I find for the most part, human beings who are in the space, who have a job, who have a role, they want agency, they want accountability, they
yeah,
want responsibility. Um, there's a sense of pride that comes with it. There's a sense of achievement if you get through it. Um, if you do have a growth mindset, there's a sense of willing to fail to learn and get better. So you're actually doing a disservice to your team by being a rescuer, which I totally admit took me years to fully get to understanding.
Okay, I absolutely love it. Okay, so I'm going to take a little bit of a shift now, because I want to get into what you're doing today. So we've talked a lot about like how you got your start in the industry and your mindset at the beginning. What are you doing today? What are you focusing? What do you? I guess let's just take a step back. What is your role today? What is your typical day? Your responsibilities?
Sure. So I'm a managing director at FirstService Residential, which basically means that a material part of an entire business line is under my responsibility to perform our contractual obligations, deliver client satisfaction, and ultimately earn retention of the business. In terms of what my day to day looks like, I have a team of management personnel, and there's a spectrum of that team of the sort of most experienced and
Yeah.
least experienced. And there's a spectrum of sort of client profile matched to personnel, right? So I have a real pulse on, I don't know if you've heard of Net Promoter Score. It's a sort of an oversimplified way of just saying like, thumbs up, thumbs down, how are we doing? And I have a very, there's a muscle that I have of just like kind of knowing how we're doing from the client's eyes.
Okay.
I think it kind of does come from what we were just talking about, which is this idea of like, I went through a period of my career where I really tried to be perfect. And so even though I'm not trying to get there in the same way that I was saying, like I learned, it doesn't mean I can't recognize what perfect is.
Okay.
And so in any situation, I have a pretty good sense of what perfect would look like. Perfect in timing, perfect in outcome, perfect in presentation, perfect in a feeling, even, right? I'm sure you can think of, at least one time in your life where you were doing a thing and you just nailed it. It was perfect.
Yeah.
It doesn't happen all the time. It may not even happen a lot, but that feeling, you can bottle it a little bit. And so my priorities shift kind of based off this little imaginary perfect meter that I have in my, gut. So there are buildings, team members, clients, problems that require my support at any given moment. And there are teammates, clients, problems that don't. So it's my job to know who can do what well, strengths and weaknesses, um, client priorities, right? It's hard when you are quote unquote in the trenches with a to-do list of 100 things and you still promised yourself you were going to take a lunch, and you still promised your loved ones you were going to be home at a reasonable time, right? It can be hard to see the forest from the trees when you're at the bottom of the forest amongst the trees. And so my job is sometimes to just help steer folks to to understand the priorities, right? We do so much in our industry that gets unrecognized.
Yeah.
And we do so much in our industry that gets recognized for the wrong reasons. So it's just, again, I'm trying to be strategic. If the client is going to experience us for 20 minutes today over 3 7-minute increments, how do I have them going away feeling good about us?
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean we're going to talk about the most important things for the building, right? In that lens, we're talking about what the client cares about, is prioritizing, is focused on, engaged on, right? And it's my job to make sure that other stuff is still happening because I know what actually is the most important thing for the building,
Yeah.
right? So my priorities shift to more high level, right? We have an operations function, we have a revenue management and leasing function, or we have a risk mitigation function. We have a training and development and leadership function. I could go on.
Yeah.
But the point is, I am assessing in real time at each level, at the account level, where the focus has to be and
Yeah.
how we are doing. And I'm constantly communicating to my team those things. And there are some people on my team who need 10 seconds from me every day, and that's all they need. And there are other folks who I have to check in with a couple times a day. So it really just kind of depends on the building, the team member. I obviously have some corporate responsibilities as well. So it's hard to really put in I do have some formulaic, elements to it. We do financial reporting on a monthly basis.
Yeah.
And so there's a calendar like cadence to when financial data is ready and when it's an internal review and when it's an external review. And, we have, other cadences that run on a calendar. Leases tend to expire at the end of the month. So, the first week of the month is very focused on vacancy processing, understanding which apartments have vacated, processing out the move outs, understanding what's being done to turn the units, strategic pricing review, communicating with brokerage, communicating with turn teams, right? It's like the first week of the month is how you set up the month to minimize vacancy loss and absorb all your vacancies, which long term is about top line performance. But if you're not doing the operational parts of that in the first 2-3 days of the month, you're falling behind in that month. So there are some things that are driven by the calendar, but for the most part, it's about like what is needed in that moment to support the various initiatives that are going on.
Yeah. Yeah. I love the way that you describe this about, like making sure that you're working with the owners and communicating with the owners in a way that is almost customized to them, right? Not necessarily the most important things you need to talk about the building, but the things that they really want to talk about, the things that are important to them and that make them happy. And you actually used a quote with me the last time we spoke, and I absolutely loved it. And you said that it's so important to remember that owners are driven by capital, but management teams have to humanize that into livable communities. So owners are purchasing these multifamily assets, and they're doing so for their own like long-term investments, for themselves, for their families. It's an investment for them. But from a management perspective, it's not an investment. It's a livable community. And so I love the word that you used, kind of like bringing those two things together, is that you have to humanize the capital investment into a livable community. Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So again, we are a third-party management company. So by definition, in my current role at my current organization, we don't own real estate. Um, there's some people in the marketplace who own real estate and have some level of passion or interest or skill set beyond the financial return, the asset allocation, where they enjoy the real estate. And those people tend to self-manage.
Okay. Yep.
By definition, we are not a self-manager.
Yeah.
So who is coming to us? The folks who don't want to deal with it. The folks who are just doing an asset allocation. The folks who have some kind of sophistication, understanding that this is not their strong suit. And so it's not in their best interest to take on this part of the process. And so our clients are often quite focused on the performance of the asset from an investment management standpoint.
Yeah.
But I don't spend my entire day watching the Treasury, watching the Fed, checking on the 10-year interest rate. I might check that once or twice a week, but that's not what I'm doing all day long. I'm not, watching the stock market hour by hour, doing these trades. I'm not watching some of the global events necessarily in real time and how they affect the supply chain of manufacturing and goods. I am working the problems of an apartment building, which are leaks, things that break, equipment failure, and personnel management. So those things translate to the income statement, which affects all the things that the clients care about. And so I've made a habit of sort of bringing the income statement to life, right? The income statement is a two-dimensional piece of paper, right? That just has numbers categorized by general ledger codes. But really the numbers represent something, right? The money we spend on uniforms clothe people who look professional and warm and welcoming and clean, right? That feeling is what gets a customer to say, I want to live in a place where people look neat and clean and professional, right? And so I could go on with all these examples, but ultimately there's revenue and expense. You want revenue growth to outpace expense growth. And you need to be able to tell a story about how the things that are happening in the building are part of that effort.
Yeah.
So, there needs to be a return on investment for expenditures, or there needs to be a narrative around sort of this is a cost of doing business, right? Capital is going to, flock to the best risk-adjusted returns. And if real estate, multifamily apartment buildings in, New York City are not the optimal place for capital to flow, it won't flow. And so my job is to show everybody a path to profitability for a particular asset. And so I'm trying always to connect the dots between what we're doing in the building and how it translates to that effort. So yeah.
And I love that. And I do. I think that messaging is so clear. But do you ever run into times where it's hard, or maybe almost even
It's hard every day
to tie
you
that?
know, you know how easy it is to buy Apple shares on the stock market?
Yeah.
And Microsoft shares and NVIDIA and Amazon, and just buy a FANG ETF. I think FANG's up like 25% more this year. My buildings won't do 25% this
Yeah.
year. They'll do better than last year, but they won't do 25%. So, you know, look, having perspective is probably the first place to start, right? Being able to level with a client that you understand their perspective, right? Um, look, it's not in my interest to say to them, well, exit the asset and go buy a bunch of Apple stock, right?
Yeah.
But I can't ignore that that's a reality for them, and I earn respect and recognition, acknowledgement, appreciation for speaking to them with that context.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, because the reality is they can't just exit, in a day, right? Real estate is not a liquid asset, right? That's sort of part of the diversification of why people are owning real estate to begin with as an investor, right?
Yeah.
It's not a liquid asset. So it is stickier. They can't just take my advice and sell it tomorrow and buy Apple stock. So they are relying on me to put things into a larger picture. We can't control the pipe bursting or the equipment failing. We just can't. But we can handle it with best practices. We can minimize losses. We can optimize insurance protection. And at the end of the day, we can tell the story of how we responded. And that's really what our function is. I'm never going to promise somebody that the pipe's not going to break. But I'm going to promise them that we're going to address it with best practices such that, the community that is amongst that property is proud to live at that community.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've mentioned something that I think is so important to talk about. And honestly, it's a big part of the, topic of this podcast, which is that it takes such a gritty personality and grit mindset in order to be successful in multifamily, because it's a tough job. And so, like you're saying, like you have the ability to kind of go above that layer a little bit and be able to see that like there are some things that are uncontrollable, and that there's a reason why people still invest in real estate even though it doesn't have the returns of some of the companies on the stock market. But at the same time, like that's a tough thing to articulate to a team who's working on site, who can, as you've actually said, like break down over years from the stress of being in multifamily. So you've defined multifamily as a very grindy environment. So what does that look like for your teams, like for the actual people who are on site doing the jobs, and what has your experience been with working with them?
Yeah, look, to be on site is demanding. Everybody knows where to find you, right? All of your constituents, all of your tenants, residents, they know where to find you.
Yeah.
So there's really there's no breaks in that sense. I think the big connection for folks who are on the front lines is always the why and the impact that it has on the resident.
Yeah.
Whenever we're doing something, especially when we're doing something new or differently, right? It's always about trying to communicate the why,
Okay.
right? Why does this matter? Why is this important, right? Why do we think this is going to be better, right? And it's not so much, and I don't, like, some people try to make it a little more like about the resident, like, oh, it's enhancing the resident experience. It's enhancing the resident experience. I'm not saying I leave that out, but like I kind of focus also on the employee.
Okay.
Right? Like the why about this is like you're going to be able to be more effective. You're going to be more efficient. You're going to have more time for different things that you don't have as much time for. Or you're going to have an easier way to do a filing or a recording or a management of information, right? So I'm always trying to make it about like getting the employee excited, right?
Yeah.
Some people, for some people, they really in our industry, I have to give a lot of credit. They're selfless and they really do care about just having a great resident experience for the people in the community, and that is enough. But for others, it's not.
Yeah.
And, so I'm always trying to, make that connection as like why this is good for you, why this is good for us. Obviously client, customer comes first, but you don't come last. You come like right after first.
I like it. Look, I always say, you know, even in the spirit of giving, right? Even the act of giving as a human is a selfish act. Like we normally give because the act of giving has been shown to raise endorphins in humans more than the act of receiving, right? So, like, it is still a selfish act. And so, I actually agree with you, even if it's that, you're going to throw this resident event and maybe, it's not something that you have time for. You don't want to spend your Thursday evening dealing with it. But, like, the response is, like, you will have happier residents after this, which then will make your life and your job easier on site if you make your residents happier, right? So it doesn't all have to be that it's like, I guess the two don't have to be mutually exclusive. Like creating a better experience for your resident actually creates a better experience for you as you're managing on site. And I agree with you. I think that can transform the experience that you have and the lens through which you have that experience.
What's hard for me, what I don't see, it's hard for me to see is there are lots of employees in the building. Janitorial, door station, handy person, technician, resident manager, assistant super, resident manager. And these are all people who come in and clock out every day. And I don't really always see the human side of how they're interacting with each other day in and day out.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's dealing with something at home. If you have 20 people working in a building, the probabilities that someone didn't get a great night's sleep are good. I mean, they're good. Unfortunately, the numbers say they're good, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like to amplify, to hone in on a culture within that group of 20 that's like I have 20 buildings, 30 buildings, whatever the number is on a given day, but like there is a culture inside one building.
Yeah.
I'm trying to like weave, teams together to a unified culture that's supported by the organization.
Yeah.
But like that still doesn't touch the fact that each building, each set of, 20 team members dedicated to one site, that's one community, that's one culture. And so just like, how is the person who slept poorly the night before, but still, had to get themselves in for the early morning garbage pickup or the early morning mop down of the lobby so that when the residents come down at, 7:30 to do their commutes, like things smell good and things are clean, like like how do you really have a pulse on who needs a pat on the back, of who needs, a free coffee, or hey, you did a great job. Like who needs a little recognition, or who, that's hard. You really have to have great on-site leadership for that. And, now you're putting more on somebody, right? There's somebody who's going to step up, who's ready to take the next step in that building. But it's hard for me to alleviate them of other responsibilities in that moment.
Yeah.
So it really just is about like who wants to step up to do more and be a leader. And so like this idea of like leadership, selfless leadership, right? I can't always put a raise of salary tied to it. I can't always put, an elevated title. I can't always do some of the traditional things that might motivate folks to step into that selfless leadership position. So that's one of my challenges, trying to explain to people that the employee who needed that pat on the back, your ability, your willingness to step into the role, to take accountability, to say, I'm going to know who that is on a given day, and then to act on it. You're going to benefit from seeing the productivity and quality of the work of that person and their mood and their contributions to the team. Like, but that's all like, you can't see it till it's there. Yeah. So you really have to tell that story for them, visualize it for them. Sometimes like I don't use the term culture champion a lot, but I have certain buildings where things are kind of jiving, and I'll sometimes like spot walk other people through those buildings you know? And I mean, even just like when I'm in the elevator of a building and I, pick up a piece of trash
Yeah.
that someone left, like
Mhm.
there's an all hands type of mentality to keep a building working at a high level.
Yeah.
And it's all these little things that stack up into the culture and experience of one building.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And, while we're on this topic of like the culture and the experience of the buildings, um, and by the way, I love culture champion. I think that's fantastic. Actually, it's a fantastic term. And I think it's so important. Actually, I want to dig into this other part, but I really want to expand on this culture champion thing. So, I'm always fascinated by the dynamics of humans and like how they like, I swear if I could go back in time, I probably should have been like a psychology major because I'm so fascinated by it. But I've always had this like feeling that, it's so easy for you to take a group of people and put like a bad apple into that group of people and it like just stresses the entire group, right? I don't care if it's like 5 people or 20. If you put a bad human into that group, like it'll just stress the entire group. But it's so much harder to put a really awesome human into that same group and to have that just one awesome human create this like the same ripple effect that the bad apple does, right? So it takes a really special person. Like it can happen. There's actually been studies that have been done around it. It can happen, but it's very rare and it takes a really special person. But I think identifying that person and like you said, that culture champion and that you don't even use that word very often because it's pretty hard to come by. But when you do, man, like celebrating that person and doing, like you said, everything you can to make them feel like appreciated and valued and helping them step up to that leadership role, even though you might not have the money, I think is really brilliant.
Yeah, you're making me kind of just reflect. Like, there's actually no like my gut would tell me like that the person willing to step into that role is motivated by some of the traditional things that motivate us in our professional career, growth, advancement,
Yeah.
moving up the ladder, if you will. And you're making me reflect. Like, I'm actually finding there's not necessarily correlation. Some of my best quote unquote culture champions, in our annual review meetings, in our check-in meetings on personal growth and development, like they make it clear like they don't want to take the next step and become a manager of 5 buildings.
Yeah.
This is where they want to be. They want to be in this one building supporting these 15 people, and they are like amazing. They have amazing impact on this like circle of people. And there's other folks who are like more focused on some of the traditional things in professional growth, and you realize like they're not actually culture champions at all. you
Yeah.
know so that's actually just an interesting thing that you're bringing forward for me. But I I try to tell folks that like there are eyes on you even when you're not watching,
Yeah.
because the building is a 24/7 type of thing. And like don't be feared, don't be fearful of that dynamic. Like, own it, make it fun.
Yeah.
Like again, no one's saying you have to be perfect, but like there's some excitement or fun even in like trying to succeed, to
Yeah.
excel, right? And like just attitude around like challenges are going to come, but like I'm rooted in this mindset, right? Like you, like kind of like you can't bring me down, a little bit like you can't bring me down. And there are tough moments where even those folks need like a minute. But if I can convert some small percentage of my team each year into that mindset, I've earned way over my pay grade, basically.
Oh, I love that. And I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, you your assets in New York are probably more like 24/7 living assets than most around the country. But I mean, having that like the teams who live there and who work there and who are there to like ensure that there's that feeling of being home in that community. I think you're right. I mean, it is a living asset. But I want to actually kind of step into a little bit of a different area. Same concept, like the culture of the asset and the people who are working there. But yet you've also worked with both affordable and high-end like luxury properties. Um, does that at all feel like two different worlds? And if so, how to you? Or how do you balance that?
It is two different worlds, and they are colliding every day as we speak here, at
Yeah,
least here in New York
tell me
City.
about that. How's
Well,
it colliding?
the landscape of development in New York City is such that to pencil any type of development deal, there needs to be a tax subsidy,
Okay.
which comes from a commitment to the state that you are building affordable housing, that you are building,
Okay.
income housing set aside for certain income limits, or housing set aside for certain rent limits.
Okay.
And so those two products are under the same roof. They're under the same roof. They're walking through the same lobby, walking through the same elevator. I mean, I'm leasing up a 500 unit project now, and you know, the two doors in the hallway, one is paying $9,000 a month, and one is paying $2,000 a month.
That's
And the
insane.
inside looks the same.
That's
The apartments look the
insane.
same, and again, all the services that we're providing, it's got to be the same,
That's
right?
incredible.
But it does get hard because economics sort of don't pick favorites, like customer service for someone paying $9,000 a month, that's very meaningful income.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah, there's an
and so,
expectation. Yeah.
you know, I'm the guy who's threading the needle between having empathy, respect for all, following the law, and making good business judgment with the reality of how numbers work. Like it's not a political statement to articulate how numbers work, but in real life, it's touchy because these are folks who have different income levels, which is, again, I don't want to go too off topic, but so much goes into that in society, right? And somehow that's on the property manager now. Like in real time, like all of our social and political stuff really actually just boils down to two tenants waiting online to speak to the manager. They live in the same exact apartment, and someone pays 9 and someone pays 2.
Yeah.
So, again, you should have people skills if you come into our industry. You should have good conflict negotiation skills. I like the food service metaphor for my business because I feel like there's a lot of similarities in terms of just like setting an expectation, meeting it or missing it with the customer.
Yeah.
Quality of product. There's so many things about it, but at the moment, I bring it up because it's like I need to know the recipe for each dish. I need like each building, each contract, how affordable the mix is, if it's exclusively luxury, if it's triple A luxury, if it's workforce, like, a short order cook knows how to make eggs like 15 different ways.
Yeah.
Right. So like you need to know how to cook your eggs 15 different ways. And when a particular customer, when one of your regulars come in, how your regular takes their eggs.
Yeah.
Right. So it's our job, especially in third party, right? If you work under one capital stack, one strategy, and you're only buying this work product in this market with this type of upside, that's very different. That's that's every customer coming in to sit at the counter and everyone likes them over easy.
Yeah.
Right? You can scale that very differently. This is each customer likes it a little bit different. And you need to, my job is to coach my team. I'm not holding my teams accountable at that level to do the strategy. That's kind of where I bring the value, right? So I'm sitting each team down going, this is the type of ownership you have, right? This is just some examples. This is a multi-generational family office that owns this building. So the building's never been sold ever since it was built. And the people you're dealing with the building was alive and operating for 30 years before they were born, right? This client is a major institutional bank
Yeah.
and an insurance company who partnered up together. The people you deal with didn't even do the deal. They got hired by the company 3 months ago,
Yeah.
right? They report to their boss once a month, right? So like my job is to unpack for, because like I want my teams to run up in front and lead and thrive and go and make decisions and be accountable, because when we throw a party, I want it to say their name on the banner, right? And if I know how to do this, that's why I'm not doing it anymore, because I know how to do it, right? They have the moment to finish their race and stand on the podium, you know? So everything works backwards from that. So I bring them in, I set them up, and I let them go.
Yeah.
And I reel them in, you know, when they get hit on the wrist, right? Like we were talking about earlier in the call, like this idea of letting them fail or letting it break, right? I bring them in, we mop it up, and we go back out there. But what that it is very different when you have exclusively affordable, when you have traditional regulated, when you have luxury, uber luxury. The customer is different, the expectations are different. What success looks like is different. Where you have to spend, you know, there's a lot more. Well, the general statement is you have to spend different amounts of time in different parts of the business for different products. You know, affordable housing comes with a lot of administration, right? You have all these government agencies that are auditing to make sure, right? The developer made a promise to keep apartments a certain way in exchange for a tax break. The government honored their end of the bargain. They gave you a tax break. They come and check that you're honoring your end of the bargain. And so that kind of property requires additional administrative, you know, work, support than a fair market luxury profile where, you know, we're paying our taxes. We didn't ask you for anything. So, you know, it's a different, you know, you still have the overall laws and rules and regulations, but you don't have these super specific nuanced ones.
Yeah.
So, but you also have a customer in a really high end luxury product whose expectations around service are just through the roof,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When you bring an affordable customer into a brand new building that has affordable housing, you know, I don't think it's that controversial to say, for the most part, their living conditions are reaching a big improvement. But when you have a luxury person, chances are the apartment they had before yours was just as nice,
Yeah.
maybe nicer, even, right? And so like the starting point, the standard, the level of expectation, right? And like, you know, that's kind of where, again, I go back to like the food service thing. Like if you order your Starbucks coffee on the app and it's still not in the little tray waiting for you when you get there, that is a miss. That is a miss on expectations, right? And so like that is a negative experience for the customer. And so we, with a higher experience bar, with a higher expectation bar, our success rate is different. And so you're managing them differently, but sometimes you have to have parts of it have to be the same. So it's nuanced, definitely.
I love what you said there with the fact that, the adage is that you spend different amounts of time in different parts of the business based on the class of the asset. And I think that makes so much sense, right? I mean, like, here we have so many affordable assets. And look, I do not mean to say that we should not treat our affordable residents well. Please do not hear that at all. Of course, we should treat them well. But we have so many different, like, I think, you know, voices that are coming at this, and they're like, well, like, affordable residents should have the exact same experience as luxury residents. And it's like, well, that's really darn hard when you have less money and you have more administrative policies and structure and like more things that you actually have to do as a business. Cause like you're saying, like for affordable, you're going to spend much more time dealing with like regulations and reporting and compliance and those sorts of things than you are with a high end asset, where you're going to spend a lot of your time doing like above and beyond customer service. And so like I think what you said is just, it's a really important point. And I think it's one that a lot of times we don't want to talk about. But it's the reality of the situation.
And to tie it back to this idea of being gritty or having grit, and I said it a little in jest, but it's like these really large issues that our society faces around affordability and around quality of life and around this concept of like, what are you entitled to just by being a basic citizen and existing versus what is, extra. It all, you go through the whole system, it manifests, and it represents itself at the doorstep of a third year, you know, art history major who decided to get into property management when their art didn't work out, you know, like who this person is really not equipped.
Yeah.
This person is at a particular disadvantage.
Yep.
Like they're just trying to report in on the status of the rent ledger, right? They're trying to comply with a city regulation that the door has to close or else it's considered broken, right? They're complying with we're required to test the valve. So for 1 hour, your kitchen sink won't have water coming out of it, right? Like that's what they got hired to do.
Yeah.
But they're actually at the forefront of like bigger issues, at least in our market at the time.
Yeah. I think that's so well said, Marc, actually. And really,
But so like, how can I support them?
Yeah.
Right. How do I support them? Right. Yeah. Like, it's not about telling them how when I had to fix a valve, right? Like that's not the anecdotal support that they really need. They need more human support.
Yeah.
They need more support in the form of, positive reinforcement, honestly. And maybe if I'm able to some more strategies, some more concrete strategies around, managing through these conversations. But like, it's really just about like telling them that I believe in them to resolve this stuff kind of in the course of business.
Yeah.
And the open door policy, right? Like, come back, tell me how it went. We'll talk it out. We'll do better next time, right? That's the other thing to have perspective. When you're 15 years in, like I've seen the same apartment vacate 3, 4, 5 times. You know what I mean? Like you have more perspective around like, because folks will come out of an interaction with a resident and it'll impact them. You talk about like the grindiness and of it, like they got yelled at because, of a tough situation that they didn't sort of start, control, but have to fix and clean up.
Yeah.
So these dynamics are happening all the time, and you get better with them with experience because you realize like it's all part of a bigger topography. It's not this one isolated. You're not a failure because Mrs. Jones wasn't happy with you today. And one of the cool things about our industry, to try to put a spin on it that I do, is like you get another chance. It's a 12-month lease. Mrs. Jones is walking through the lobby tomorrow and the next day and the next day. So either, you can only bring it home if it's going to make you better. Only bring it home if you're going to come in the next day and be waiting for Miss Jones in the lobby, with an apology or with a little special extra, Otherwise, professional athletes, whatever sport you want, like they don't hit every shot. They don't hit every pitch they swing at, right? And so why should you necessarily expect that you're gonna, right? And we don't make millions and millions of dollars like they do. So.
I love that. I couldn't agree more. To only bring it home with you if it makes you better. Otherwise, let it go. I love it. Well, Marc, this has been such a fun conversation, and I love the way that you think about like leadership and it's so obvious because everything that we've talked about, you always bring it back to how you support your team and being successful. So it's so clear that you really see your team members as being the really that catalyst to creating success for the owners that you work for, and how important it is for you to lead them. And so I'm very excited actually to ask my last questions of you, just because it's been such a great conversation and your approach to leadership is just so inspiring. So the first question that I want to ask as we wrap things up is, would you mind to share a story with us from your time in multifamily?
Yeah, well, you had told me like a little bit of a focus on grit and determination and whatnot. So I kind of went through the catalog of stories and decided to share one from more of the early days, which was my first major gas leak at a
Oh,
building in Flushing, Queens, when I was less than 5 years a manager. A 150 unit building that the utility company basically came in off of a complaint, and like all the bad luck, the coin bounced against our favor, in every way. And the entire building had gas service shut, which means no cooking of the stoves and no heat for the boiler in the winter. And there's a very onerous, safety oriented process by which the utility company will permit you to restore the gas service.
okay.
And you have to pressure test the plumbing lines of the entire building. What makes this story unique is a lot of things can go your way where you only have to test portions of the building. This was like the entire building. And this was above my experience level at the time.
Yeah.
Um, but I had this chip on my shoulder being young, that I wanted to show those big bosses who had given me that opportunity, in the first place, like that I really could handle it and I was ready. And the reason I'm telling the story is the determination part. I lived at that building for 40 days. I didn't literally sleep there, but like it took 40 days. It was, you know, um, 12 or 15, probably 18 lines of apartments, 6 or 7 stories. Each pipe goes vertically, connecting the apartment below and above, and then it goes out across. So you would test basically in sections, and if the pressure held, you'd make the section bigger. And if the pressure stopped holding, you'd be able to isolate where the pressure was being lost, which was a leak in the pipe. This was a 60-year-old building, so even though they only found a leak in one spot, turns out there were all these other leaks that no one ever knew about.
Oh my gosh.
I got to the building every day by 7:15 in the morning. I was at the building till 10 o'clock at night every day, 6 days a week for 40 days. I had other buildings.
Yeah.
And
Oh my
the staff at some point, like the way I just kept showing up meant so much to the staff. My role was like administrative, honestly. Like in that situation, like you have plumbers, you have technical folks, you have the folks getting dirty. Like I was clipboard guy. I was keeping track of like which apartments had the tests and what the readings were, and like when we could take a bunch and request approvals. Administrative. Today, literally an app, a bot could do the thing that I was doing.
But it was
But
the thing that you could control.
But it helped me realize that it's not the thing. It's not the skill
Yeah.
of knowing how to write or organizing information on a chart. It was like bringing coffee,
Yeah.
and
Just being there.
like I got home and I was there the next morning.
Yeah.
And like I looked tired, but I was there.
Yeah.
It was like being there and like setback after setback, and just being there. And like, yeah, I had a personal thing. I was in an early stage in my career. I knew the lights were like on me, and this was a moment. And I still probably, like a cheesy way, like have the job well done emails that came from like the highest parts of the company on day 50 and 60, because there are stories of 100 days. There are stories of 150 days. There are stories where you have to get temporary equipment at a very expensive rate outside the building. So like there were relative successes in the handling of the emergency. And I was motivated to impress people early on in my career. But like, you see what it can do. It can push you to show up in a way, and then like how electric and that is to other people.
Yeah.
And it was just a great lesson for me early on, that like meeting the moment means different things at different times, and I'd always just been a little like in the box about like, well, when it's time to meet the moment, I'm going to have to know how to do math that other people don't know how to do, or I'm going to have to know, a skill or a process, and like actually it's the human side of stuff that really is the meeting the moment magic. So, it's one thing to like hear about it on a podcast. It's another thing to live it. Because when you live it, you really like it, you can internalize it much faster and more personally.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's an awesome story, Mark. And I can't even imagine the amount of pressure on your shoulders, or even today on the shoulders of anyone on your team, when a building like that in New York loses heat and the ability to cook. I really can't imagine. So I love it. And I couldn't agree more. Like just showing up in those like extremely hard times, like you said, with coffee or a smile on your face or the clipboard, just to walk around and be of service to people. Like that's what really counts. I love it. Well, now I'm excited to hear your response to my next question, because I'm an avid reader, and I know most of our listeners are as well. So I'm very excited to ask you if you have a book that you'd like to recommend.
I brought three just because the
I
first three
love
that
it.
came up. I won't go too fast, but like they cover different things. Atomic Habits by James Clear is one of my favorite books. I can read it, almost once a year. For me, like again, it's property management is such a 1% at a time industry, like again, all the things you can't control, right? All these headwinds, right? So it's like 5 steps forward, 3 steps back,
Yeah.
5 steps forward, 3 steps back, right? But like focus on the +2, like focus on the incremental improvements over time and building strong foundations. So like that's definitely like one. I wanted to bring like a real estate specific book.
Mhm.
So Am I Being Too Subtle by Sam Zell is a great read. It's the kind of one of the last things he did before he passed away. Sam Zell, if you're not familiar, is one of the most prolific developers in real estate, over the last 100 years, and basically one of the most authentic people in real estate.
Okay.
He was a contrarian investor. He would buy the stuff that everyone was running away from, and he would buy it with conviction, and he would be very like open and public and like raw about what he was doing and how he was thinking, and like the message of authenticity there and conviction, and also just like again, like if you're into real estate, if you're into like learning about how there's just so much to put together to get through on a deal, it's a good read. And then my last one, which was like really kind of truly like who I am in terms of like reflecting on who I am, is Poor Charlie's Almanac by Charlie Munger, which technically is a book on investments and investment theory. Charlie Munger was Warren Buffett's long-term business partner at Berkshire Hathaway, recently passed away. But that there is so much wisdom in that book. I find the way I was doing a comparison of the food space to real estate, I find that investing is very much like life. Advice around managing risk and planning and opportunity costs and trade-offs is very much metaphorical for life. And I feel like this wisdom, I feel like is getting like accumulating wisdom and valuing wisdom, I feel like is something that's getting lost in our generation today, where like we have everything's fast, everything's digital, a lot of it's impersonal, a lot of it's instant gratification. And like wisdom is like a fine wine. Like you can't have it, you can't acquire it like through a shortcut. You have to really just like let it mature in the barrel.
Yeah.
And so there's so much wisdom in Charlie's philosophies and his views that, you can kind of just randomly pick on any page, and it's a super refreshing, insightful message that's in there.
I love that. Well, the last two are books I have not heard yet on the podcast. And so I actually hadn't heard of Am I Being Too Subtle? So I'm very interested in that. And I've never read Charlie's Almanac, so I'm interested in that too. So those were great recommendations. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
Mark. I appreciate it. Well, Mark, I have really enjoyed this conversation. I love your approach and how you're thinking about the industry and the value that you're adding to it. So thank you so much for spending this time with me today.
Kerri, it was really great to hang out and chat. I appreciate it so much. And thank you again.
Yeah, same.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of Multifamily Grit. I hope you enjoyed hearing from Marc Pollack and gaining insight into his thoughtful, human-centered approach to multifamily. Marc's story reminds us that property management is more than operations and assets. It's about empathy, perspective, and the balance between investors, residents, and the people in between who make communities thrive. From learning the business in the boiler rooms to shaping strategy in the boardrooms, Marc shows how technical skill, heart, and grit all have to coexist to make this industry work. We also want to thank our episode sponsor, Fortress, the only core property management operating system built with an emphasis for affordable owners and operators. Fortress helps streamline compliance, automate housing assistance payments, and simplify document management so teams can focus on what really matters: serving people. If you found value in today's episode, please like, subscribe, and share it with a colleague who would appreciate Marc's perspective on leadership, empathy, and the reality of building scalable, human-first operations in multifamily. Until next time, stay gritty, stay passionate, and we'll see you back here soon.